After 60 years, Robert Duvall speaks out. There are 4 individuals that I simply cannot tolerate. In the movie industry, Robert Duvall has been a representation of honesty and quality for over 60 years. The kind of performer that colleagues and audiences admired. Renowned for being discreet, disciplined, and serious. He was professionalism personified. However, beneath that serene surface, ancient wounds have subtly lingered. Up until today, he had never wanted to revisit those memories. The 94-year-old Oscar-winning maestro, who contributed to some of the finest works of film, has finally voiced the words he has kept hidden for a lifetime in an interview that has shocked Hollywood. He just couldn't stand the names of 4 actors. According to reports, Duvall said, "I've kept my mouth shut for decades. What am I waiting for, though, at this age? It's time to be honest." The industry was shocked by the disclosure. Not only because of what he said, but also because it was spoken by Robert Duvall, the man who has long been considered the epitome of a gentleman in Hollywood. The actor who, apparently, never spoke harshly to anyone. These rifts must have been so deep that they plagued him well into his 10th decade, as evidenced by his decision to speak out after 50 years. According to people close to the actor, these conflicts went far beyond simple personality conflicts. In many instances, they even changed the direction of beloved movies that we believe to be classics. They also modified performances and productions. Hollywood now watches with nervous anticipation as Duvall finally decides to speak up. Which 4 names belong to whom? And what realities have been concealed beneath those gilded movie set stories and smiles? Prior to disclosing the 4 names that have caused a stir. Hollywood, we must first comprehend why one of the most reclusive and orderly individuals in the business, Robert Duvall, eventually made the decision to end his long-standing quiet. No single moment of rage or sorrow, according to those close to him, prompted the choice. It was the result of something far more profound, a time of introspection that frequently occurs in the last stages of life. When Robert believed that the historical record needed to be corrected, he disclosed a long-standing associate who asked to remain anonymous. He has spent years watching Hollywood documentaries and retrospectives that tell wholly untrue stories, transforming toxic and stressful relationships into tales of friendliness and harmony. He was more troubled by that misunderstanding than most people knew. According to reports, a recent homage honoring Duvall's extraordinary career served as the last trigger. He saw montages of his most famous performances while seated in the audience. Many moments included actors he had secretly hated for decades. "I sat there listening to all that revisionist nonsense about mutual respect and creative partnerships while remembering how one of those people used to purposefully step on my lines to ruin takes and another tried to get me fired from what became one of my signature roles." At 94, with an Academy Award, multiple nominations, and a legacy firmly secured, Duvall told his interviewer, all the while, the narrative spoke of wonderful collaborations and deep friendships that simply never existed. He remarked, "Even the greatest films are not always born of harmony." More significantly, he felt a feeling of obligation toward the next generation. These new actors deserve to know the reality. There is no reason to perpetuate Hollywood's carefully created illusions any longer. Conflict, envy, and challenging situations behind the scenes might occasionally be the source of them. Dustin Hoffman, the first name, and the credit. Thief who never stopped. Like Duvall, Dustin Hoffman started out as a struggling character actor before becoming a leading man. Duvall recalled, "I was a struggling actor in New York with Dustin Hoffman, and we were friends, or at least I thought we were, but friendship meant something very different to him than it did to me." The third name on Duvall's historic list shocked many because of how closely their early paths once aligned. In the early 1960s, the two lived together in a small apartment in New York City, making ends meet while trying out for stage parts. What began as friendship quickly evolved into a quiet rivalry. Hoffman frequently used their rehearsal sessions as a chance to steal his original ideas. "I'd work for weeks on a particular interpretation for an audition," Duvall said. "I'd practice it in our apartment. Then all of a sudden, Dustin would be summoned for the same role, and he would sometimes utilize my same method word for word. Hoffman would tell people that Duvall had inspired him when he was cast in the parts. That's a fancy word for theft, Duvall remarked sourly. This pattern, according to Duvall, persisted even after both men achieved prominence in Hollywood. When Duvall portrayed the outlaw Ned Pepper in the 1969 True Grit production, Hoffman would frequently call him to get his opinion on character development and voice acting for Midnight Cowboy, which was being filmed at the same time. Duvall recalled, "I spent hours on those calls, helping him find Ratso Rizzo's voice. Then I came upon an interview in which he stated that he spent months studying homeless individuals in New York to create the speech patterns. Never brought up our discussions." A few years later, the last straw was reached when both males were vying for the lead in the 1971 French Connection. The part eventually went to Gene Hackman. "I stopped answering his calls at that point." Duvall stated, "I realized some people never stop taking from others. They just get better at pretending it's collaboration." Dustin Hoffman allegedly went beyond creative theft, according to production sources who have since confirmed Duvall's allegation. In the course of the Hoffman allegedly warned director William Friedkin during the French Connection casting process that Duvall was challenging and recalcitrant, citing their early theater experiences as evidence. Duvall feels that the role that may have completely changed his career was lost because of this characterization. According to Duvall, that went beyond professional rivalry and into intentional sabotage. Duvall questioned Hoffman about the rumor years later. Duvall denied it. Remembered. However, Friedkin himself told me this. For decades, despite the underlying animosity, Duvall remained friendly with Hoffman in public, going to the same events, participating in panels, and even complimenting his performances. This professional facade explains why Hollywood was taken aback by the discovery. The silent animosity that had long simmered between two actors was not widely suspected as among of their generation's best. Although the business was taken aback by Duvall's admission regarding Hoffman, the entertainment industry was truly shocked by his last disclosure. It called a man who had looked to have an unshakable reputation. Marlon Brando, the second name, is the most destructive ego I have ever met. Great performances in Hollywood don't always come from great relationships, Duvall clarified. Sometimes they come out in spite of bad ones. With his characteristic bluntness, he said, "That's the reality of this business nobody talks about." He then started naming names, sending shockwaves through an industry built on carefully maintained illusions and courteous silences. Even seasoned Hollywood insiders were shocked by the first name he said, Marlon Brando. "The most destructive ego I ever encountered," Duvall declared without hesitation. It was a revelation that rocked the Duvall acknowledged Brando's genius, saying, "He was a genius, no question, but he was also the most destructive ego I ever encountered in this business, a man who would sabotage entire productions just to prove he could, not because Brando was some obscure figure, but rather because he was Marlon Brando, the man many consider to be the greatest actor of all time." During the hectic 1966 filming of The Chase, a movie that is now mostly forgotten but whose cast list reads like a who's who of Hollywood royalty, Marlon Brando, Robert Duvall, Jane Fonda, and Robert Redford, a psychological battle was taking place behind the camera that would forever alter Duvall's perception of professionalism in acting. Brando would purposefully alter his performance from take to take in order to make editing. The tension increased until it finally reached a breaking point during a crucial monologue, one of Duvall's most important moments in the film, and according to several sources now willing to support Duvall's account, Brando would purposefully ruin the coverage of other actors' scenes if he didn't like the director's approach. He called it protecting the integrity of the performance, but I called it professional sabotage. Kept interrupting the scene by making tiny, nearly undetectable noises off camera during Duvall's takes. The noises were so faint that only the microphones could detect them, necessitating several retakes. After the fifth ruined take, I confronted him, Duvall recalled. What followed would be a watershed in both his relationship with Brando and his perception of the unseen violence behind Hollywood's golden facade. Clash, Brando's grin, and Duvall's brutal lesson. He simply grinned and remarked, perhaps you ought to make better decisions. That was Marlon, Duvall said after pausing. He would undermine you and then portray it as a sign of weakness. This discovery is especially striking because it fully adds to the public narrative of their relationship. Duvall has credited Brando as an influence for decades, lauding his artistic abilities in. The two men would later reappear in the same cinematic universe with The Godfather, but notably, they did not share any scenes together. As a result of Duvall's admission, this scheduling decision seems much less coincidental than previously thought. I learned more from watching Maron than from anyone else, Duvall said, but what I learned wasn't just about acting. I learned how not to treat colleagues. I discovered that brilliance does not justify cruelty. The reason Duvall remained silent for so long was a complicated mixture of respect and contempt, admiration for Brando's extraordinary talent and disgust for his haughtiness. However, if the first revelation stunned Hollywood, the second name on Duvall's list proved even more surprising. The third name, James Caan, was fiercely competitive. The second actor. Jimmy and I created one of the most believable brother relationships in film history, Duvall said, referring to his co-star from The Godfather, James Caan, whose portrayal of the fiery Sonny Corleone became iconic, just as Duvall's cool-headed Tom Hagen did. And we accomplished it with hardly any off-camera communication. Acting is what that is. According to Duvall, their tension began early during the first rehearsals for The Godfather. Both men were vying for prominence within the ensemble. Duvall, known for his meticulous preparation and quiet professionalism, found himself repeatedly undermined by Caan's relentless competitiveness. Jimmy was competitive to the point of malice. He purposefully tried to outdo everyone, especially me, Duvall recounted. He would abruptly begin doing some business with his hands or make exaggerated faces, anything to divert attention, if I had a crucial line or moment. According to reports, the antagonism intensified during the now famous family gathering scene in which the Corleones discuss whether or not to declare war on the Tatalias. Duvall had been discreetly talking about Tom Hagen's motivations with director Francis Ford Coppola when Caan smirked and cut him off with a disparaging comment about overanalyzing glorified secretary duties. I made the decision that we would never be friends at that point, Duvall stated bluntly. I also decided that Tom Hagen would always keep a close eye on Sonny in every scene. Since that's just what a consolier would do with a hothead like Sonny, it really improved the performance. What makes this discovery especially? It's shocking how well both actors were able to conceal their hostility across decades of press tours, anniversary celebrations, public appearances, and innumerable Godfather reunions. They flawlessly portrayed themselves as lifelong brothers in arms throughout interviews by exuding warmth and companionship. We both knew what was on the line when we were advertising the movie. We weren't going to let personal issues damage something that important, Duvall clarified. We played our roles, smiled, and gave the appropriate anecdotes. That's acting, too. More than any honor could, Robert Duvall's modest professionalism and readiness to defend the work in the face of intense personal animosity speak volumes about his character. It also clarifies how these disputes were concealed beneath decades of red carpets and staged love for such a long time. However, although his confrontations with Caan and Brando remained largely professional, Duvall's the third insight was far more profound. He hinted that this one was private. Robert Redford, the fraudster hiding behind the gilded image, is the fourth name. The last and possibly most explosive name on Duvall's list was that of Robert Redford, the golden boy of Hollywood, the epitome of intelligence, ethics, and grace. Redford's reputation as a conscientious artist, environmentalist, and supporter of independent film has been impeccable for decades, almost impervious to criticism. Redford created the ideal public image. The serious craftsman, the idealist, the man of principle, but the reality I experienced was something else entirely. Behind that polished exterior, Duvall asserted, was a cunning opportunist who saw fellow performers as hurdles and crew workers as furniture. Their feud started when Duvall played sports columnist Max Mercy opposite Redford's iconic baseball hero, Roy Hobbs, in the 1984 film The Natural. When Duvall noticed Redford's treatment of the production crew, what ought to have been a cordial business partnership swiftly soured. He would keep entire crews waiting for hours while he prepared, Duvall said. It's not because he was really involved in character work, instead, he would be on the phone managing business transactions as everyone else stood around earning their salaries while the day went by. That's not artwork. That's arrogance. The tense atmosphere on set reached a breaking point while their pivotal confrontation moments were being filmed, when personal stress started to seep into the performance, producing an intensity that the camera caught but that nobody at the time could completely comprehend. Duvall claimed that Robert Redford's well-preserved facade of artistic purity concealed a much more selfish objective on site. Duvall claimed that while the natural was being produced, Redford urged director Barry Levinson to reduce his involvement on several occasions. According to reports, he contended that some sequences were superfluous to the plot, particularly those where Max Mercy questioned Roy Hobbs's heroic tale. It became evident that he perceived any powerful figure in opposition to him as a danger. According to Duvall, this has nothing to do with promoting the movie. Ensuring he dominated every frame was the goal. He was aware of the irony. Redford was portraying a character whose reputation was in danger due to an investigation by a journalist. In the background, he was attempting to stifle the journalist's involvement in the film. Duvall was especially enraged by the duplicity of it all, the stark contrast between Redford's actions in private and his public image as a collaborator. Duvall remembered that he would preach artistic integrity while standing on stage at Sundance. After that, he would return to a film set, demand the right to make the final cut, and exercise veto power over the casting of other performers. There was a striking disparity between his image and reality. However, the most damaging incident occurred on the natural during post-production. Redford was confronted by Duvall about his behind-the-scenes activities. Crew members who witnessed the exchange said that Duvall has never forgotten the comment that followed. Redford: "You're a character actor, Bob. I'm a movie star. We're not playing by the same rules." Duvall acknowledged that this moment made everything clear. The golden image's deception. "I never again gave him the same look." Perhaps more than any previous discovery, this last one has shocked Hollywood to its core. From one Robert to. Additionally, it has compelled the industry to reconsider not only Robert Redford's meticulously preserved reputation but also the whole narrative of Hollywood's good guys. Beautiful, brilliant pictures that might finally be revealing their flaws. Hollywood is reeling from the fallout from Duvall's allegations. The film business has experienced a mixture of astonishment, denial, confirmation, and introspection in the days after his remarkable interview. The only surviving stars Duvall named by name, Dustin Hoffman and Robert Redford, have issued well-crafted remarks expressing their astonishment at his descriptions while highlighting their admiration for his contributions to film. The modest surge of business insiders who have come out to corroborate some of Duvall's claims, however, has been more telling. Redford's on-set behavior has been described similarly by several members of the Natural's crew. An ex-assistant. The Godfather director also spoke to the obvious conflict that existed between Duvall and James Caan while the movie was being filmed. Although he would not go into detail, Francis Ford Coppola admitted that the chemistry you see on film might occasionally be the result of extremely complex personal dynamics behind the camera. More significantly, a number of well-known actors have privately contacted Duvall to express gratitude for sharing what many of us have gone through but never felt comfortable sharing, according to people close to him. After breaking decades of quiet, Duvall himself seems unburdened rather than remorseful. In a succinct follow-up remark, he made it clear that his intention was to rectify a historical record that had been so thoroughly sterilized that it was almost fictional, not to harm anyone's legacy. Duvall wrote, "I've given 60 years to this industry and have always treated it with respect. Part of that respect means being honest about its realities, both good and bad." He stressed that these weren't small arguments or brief altercations, but rather persistent practices that had an impact on productions and livelihoods of individuals. He feels that those facts, rather than just the polished version that we have all decided to pretend is true, should be included in the historical record. One question still has to be answered as the entertainment industry continues to handle these shocking disclosures. Is there anything else Duvall has to tell? His enigmatic final remark during the interview invites conjecture. Though they weren't by themselves, those four stood out. Myth-making has always been Hollywood's stronger suit than confronting reality. Maybe it's time for the opposite now.